all of the topics of today, or all of the theory of today on the business model canvas. Oh, wait, 1 second. We were receiving one remark that there was now no sound. Let me check it for now. Is the sound working? If someone in the chat window can please answer if the sound is working for now. It is working?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, great. So if you have any questions during the webinar, please use the chat window. If you have any questions after the webinar, or when you look at this webinar on YouTube later today or later this week, if you have any questions on key partners, for instance, which we will be discussing today, please email us or contact us from Startup Launch Class at any time. Hopefully we can help you then. Okay, before we get started at the topic of today, let's take a quick look at the numbers of the startups who are participating, and their coaches, of course, who are participating in Startup Launch Class this edition. What you see here is that the startups, the teams of startups have conducted well over 600 customer interviews up till now. So that's a pretty amazing number. Again, ran several experiments, over 45 by now, which led to 10 pivots. Unfortunately, we can't take you to all the learnings and all the pivots the startups have made so far, but they are really, really valuable, of course. But also in the end, current status, 16 leads for all the startups and 4 committed deals. So big compliment there to all the startups who are participating in Startup Launch Class. So let's get started with the agenda of today. Let's take a quick look at it. Today we will be talking about key partners, one of the key building blocks, of course, of your business model canvas, on the left side of your business model canvas, but also something totally different, which is not a building block per se of your business model and your business model canvas. But since you are in the early stages of creating your team, some of you are growing your team, of course, are thinking about hiring your first people, we would like to talk about team effectiveness. So how you can get or keep your team most effective. So we'll be talking a few minutes about that today. And of course, we will end up with the question round, but also a quick look at upcoming Friday, the work session for the participants of Startup Launch Class. So a quick look at what we have discussed the past weeks. Of course, what you see here, we've been talking about and working on the right side primarily of your business model canvas, right? So finding the product market fit. Most of you are, of course, still finding that product market fit, and the type of relationships you need to establish, and the type of channels, distribution channels, sales channels, marketing channels you need to use. And we also looked at and discussed about the different revenue streams your business model can have. Last week, we talked about the first 2 building blocks on the left side of your business model canvas, which were key resources and key activities. And besides just discussing the business models, the business model building blocks and itself, we also talked about how, especially the right side works together, right? You need to see it as a whole. You need to see it and need to work on it as an iterative approach. But also last week we discussed on how the left side compares to the right side of your business model canvas, especially when we look at the revenue model, of course. Hopefully in the end, if you want to create a viable business model, the left side of your business model, so your key resources, your key activities, the partnering structures we'll be talking to today, should be smaller, of course, than the right side, the revenue side of your business model canvas. So let's start with the topic of today, which is key partners, the most left side building block of your business model canvas. Let's get started on that. So key partners, and what's interesting actually about partners is that these are other companies that or other people that make your business model work, right? They provide you with the key resources, They might be partners, they might be suppliers. It really depends on your specific type of business model and the type of partnerships you need to establish or you want to establish. But they are needed to make your business model work, to make your business model succeed. So that's why it's important that today we're going to spend this webinar on really trying to understand this key building block in your business model canvas, key partners. So what you need to understand, though, is the key questions when you talk about key partnerships is what type of relationship do you need to have with them, right? Is it a strategic alliance? Is it more a corporation? And what are you going to do in this partnership? And what are these partners are going to do for you? So key questions you see here on this slide is which partners leverage your business model, right? Which partners do you use, and which companies or which people are advanced specifically? And who do you need to rely on and why? But also, most importantly, why are they key to your business model, right? Do they deliver certain specific resources? Do they deliver certain specific activities that are key for your success of your business model? So then the question, why partnering, right? Let's start with that first. There are different reasons to partner, and we have different reasons here on this slide. Let me take you through a couple of them. So when we look at different reasons to partners, like I said, we can distinguish several reasons on why you would want to partner, right? And it's all not all the same reasons hold for you as a business. It really depends on your specific business model and your specific situation. So let's start with the first one there, faster time to market. A partner sometimes can help you with let's say, the production process, or with the distribution process, or with providing the right people, or providing the right resources, right? So anything that can be helpful to get to market faster, especially for a startup. You're on limited time, as you're specifically on a limited budget. So a partner could really help you to create and establish a faster time to market. But also, more from a cost perspective, partnering and partnering structure could be really an efficient tool to have a more efficient use of capital, of course, right? By collaborating on items such as, let's say, production or marketing efforts. You and your partner could really be able to save money from it. And this is probably more the case when companies the same size will partner, but we will talk about sizes and partnering specifically for startup situation later on this webinar. Also, access to a marketing brand is really an important reason, could be an important reason to create a partnership, right? Wouldn't it be great to access, let's say, a Facebook label, right? Or to be a Microsoft partner, just to name one example. So partnering could be let's say, a strategy or tool to really strengthen your own brand, to really leverage on someone else's brand, if that is helpful for your current situation, of course. Another reason to create a partnership is, of course, access to new markets or new customers, or customers to start out with, right? Remember also the guest lecture of last Friday, SpeakApp. They currently use partners in Germany, so their new growth market, to get access to these new customers, because their key learning was, well, you know what, we tried it ourselves for a while. It's really hard for us, really difficult for us to access to German markets. So we use partnering for that, to really create access to new markets and to these new customers. So as you can see, there are many quite different type of reasons, and also different reasons why you would go into in a partnership, or you want to go into a partnership. But also, before we get any further, let's actually look at what a partnership actually is. So what defines a partner and what defines a partnership? What is really important, though, is that you need to understand that a partnership, when we talk about a true partnership, it has to be a two-way street, right? So what I mean by that, it needs to work both ways, of course. Like I said, you need to do something in this partnership, and the partner needs to do something also in this partnership. But you two also need to expect benefits from this partnership. So you see here a couple of statements on what defines a partnership. So for instance, when we talk about shared economics, not only do you need to get out something out of this partnership, of course, also your partner needs to have an economic reasons or a benefit for this partnership. But also not only for success, also the same holds for failure, right? Your partner should be really stressed if the partnership fails, of course, or if the certain goal you establish or that you agree upon fails. So mutual success and mutual failure is a really important reason or a really important element in the definition of a partnership. So again, when we look at the Speak App example and the German partner or the German partnership, so not only does Speak App benefit from the relationship by getting new German customers, of course, so does also this specific partner benefit with the specific revenue sharing model that they use, right? So what you really need to understand and what's really vital in creating or establishing partnership is also what is in it specifically for your partner. And that's really an item that most people just skip, and they look at a partnership and look at their own benefits. But it's really important and vital to understand what's in it for your partner, right? Why would they partner with you? So what you also need to understand is really important, especially in this phase as a startup, that, I mean, there's a lot of literature and a lot of theory on partnership. Most of this literature is about partnerships between companies of the same size. And I think the game is a bit different when you talk about partnerships between a startup and, for instance, a larger brand or a larger company. And we also will be talking about it later this webinar. But if you have any questions on, okay, I understand the theory, how does it work specifically in my situation as a startup, as a small team, as a small company, and I want to create this partnership with a greater company, with a larger company, how does it work specifically in my situation? Then by all means, please ask questions, of course. There's already one question. If you have only one supplier, this is automatically your key partner. Great question. That is the case, yeah. Especially, for instance, when you look at one example for funding, right? You have one supplier of funding. That is your key partner, right? What you see most of the times, they might also be sometimes even your customer. It really depends on your specific business model. But if you have one supplier, then yes, for sure, they are your most important, and maybe even your most important asset in your business model. But for sure, they are your partner. So let's take a look at different type of partnerships. Let me just get that slide, because not all partnerships are the same, of course. What you see here on this slide are just different examples in the market, recent examples from the market on different type of partnerships. And we thought it might be helpful just to discuss different type of partnerships and some concrete examples from the market. So probably one of the most well-known examples, of course, especially in the recent years, is the partnership between Apple, the manufacturer, of course, and Foxconn, which is a great example of a supplier partnership, of course, but might even at times be a joint venture as well, right? So it might be a supplier partnership turning into a joint venture here and there. For instance, when they are moving more towards a co-development of new touchscreens, for instance, then this supplier partnership is turning more into a joint venture partnership. So another example, and it's on the right side of the slide there, is a partnership between Pepsi and Starbucks. And that's more a strategic alliance, or was more a strategic alliance. So when two companies work together, but not start a new legal entity, for instance, this is a great example. So when Pepsi and Starbucks work together to promote Frappuccino, right, a new product, or actually just a new branding, these two brands decided to work together more in a strategic alliance partnership. And that's a great example how two businesses or two companies could really work together on leverage a brand and product. So another example of a type of partnership is what you see there is the example Paris Fashion Week, but you have numerous other examples, not only on fashion weeks, but on this type of partnership. And it's what we call the co-opetition, right? So that's more a collaboration between competitors. So this is when two or more competitors temporarily, most of the time, temporarily join forces for let's say, co-promotion. If we look at the example of Paris Fashion Week, usually these high-end fashions brands, of course, are in a fierce competition, right? And during this week in Paris Fashion Week, they decide to, you know what, join forces and really co-promote this Paris Fashion Week. Let's all be in several stands together. So really join forces during this Paris Fashion Week it's a perfect example of a co-opetition. So they really collaborate on offering a great customer experience during this Paris Fashion Week. So these type of partnerships, these co-opetition type of partnership, what you see there is a lot of times in one-time or short-time events, right? So it's also can be helpful to really think about these type of partnerships when you talk about think about branding your own startup during a certain event, for instance. And a partnership type that has arisen the last couple of years specifically is what we call traffic partners. You also see an example on this slide, right? An example is, for instance, from the online travel industry. When you look at companies like Expedia, Trivago, and Hipmunk. But besides Hipmunk and Expedia, you have tons of online travel sites, of course. So what they do, they lead traffic and potential customers, and not only to each other's website, but also specifically to the airline industry, right? So they are a traffic partner specifically for the airline industry. So here we talk about click-through ratio, stuff like that. But also when we look at one of the startups in our class, SponsorMeter, is actually a traffic partnership, right? They lead traffic to the certain web shops like MediaMarkt or like Zalando. So what you just saw were different type of partnerships you can establish. Like I said, not all the partnerships are the same, right? If you talk about the amount of intensity, how you work together, but a partnership also brings specific risks, of course, and it's also a good idea just to take a quick look at that. So when we talk about partnership risk, like I said, going into partnership not only brings benefits. Maybe it's helpful to start with looking at one great example on partnership risk. What you see here is it was a concept picture of Boeing, and in the phase of creating their new aircraft, the 787, the Dreamliner. And I think, especially from a business case point of view, this is a great example of how a partnership is not always successful, of course. So Boeing, when they started to build their 787 aircraft, so it was a new jet engine airplane made out of carbon fiber, right? So they decided to do something that no airline manufacturer had done so far. So what they decided, instead of Boeing building all the parts, they were going to outsource all the manufacturing risk at different partners all around the world. And you see here, what you see on this slide is one picture on all the different manufacturers. Well, actually, not all the manufacturers. This is a selection of them with the biggest components of the Boeing 787. But what they did, they outsourced all of the different components to all these different companies all around the world. So several Boeing engineers actually discussed, right? They were like, no, there were decades of experience in this company. We should keep it as one value chain, as one production chain. We should keep it into our own company. We shouldn't do that. But Boeing decidedly, mostly because of financial pressures back then, it would be a much more strategic move to have people building, let's say, the central fuselage in Italy. You can see that there, but also the wingtips in South Korea somewhere. So again, what you see here are all these different type of components, from the central fuselage, from the engine parts, from the wingtips, building from Italy, South Korea, Sweden, stuff like that. It's really interesting business case to read more about it. But in the end, though, there were more than 325 suppliers, right, for all these different components. And the idea looked great on paper. From an Excel spreadsheet point of view, this was a perfect exercise to do it on that way. In the end, like I said, there were over 300 suppliers working on different components of the Boeing 787. So it turned out, of course, to be the worst business decision made, maybe even in the entire 21st century, right? Probably because it was made by accountants, like I said, and not by engineers, or not by the company, well, as a company as a whole. So it turned out at the end that all of these partners delayed the program by 3 to 4 years because there was a huge amount of rework that had to be done. Parts didn't work together, parts didn't fit. So in this example, it's not just to bash Boeing, of course, but to show you that even the smartest companies on the world sometimes make decisions and mistakes when it comes to partnering that look great on paper, or look great on spreadsheets, or look great on the first couple of conversations that you have with these partnerships. But partnerships in the end, of course, should be about delivering a higher value to your end customer, or should be on delivering a greater customer experience at the end, of course. So that's really important to keep in mind, and hopefully this example can get you thinking about establishing partnerships. So let's have a quick look at a couple of questions that were asked in the chat. Were there successful partnerships created last year with startups, and can we learn from that? Let me think about it. Yeah, I think the one of the best examples there is also referring to the last question. When you have one supplier, is that your key partner? When we look at one of the startups of last year, back then named Aquantufo, has a different name right now, has different labels right now. I mean, his production takes place in Africa, right? And you can see that as a, let's say, as a passive supplier. But what he has learned, especially in the last year, but also in the 10 weeks of the last edition of Startup Launch Class, was so vital to be fully aligned between this partner, so the supplier and the production partner of his fabrics, but also the production partner of the fabrics into specific clothing items, that he decided to really open an office there in Africa as well. So William, the founder of the company, of course, has been in Africa for the last 3 months to really establish this partnership, to really fine-tune this partnership. He has one employee working there now full-time to really also maintain this partnership. So that's a great example of something that was more of just a supplier relationship, quite passive relationship, turned into a more active partnership. And we're trying to see if we can invite him as for a guest lecture. So really helpful to learn more from him about this specific partnership. Okay, let's think about risk. Besides that Boeing example, let's think about risk in managing partnerships. So probably the biggest one, the biggest risk to manage is, let's call that impedance mismatch, right? So specifically as a startup, and also I see one question is about this item. As a startup, sometimes you barely register on the radar of a big company, right? And it's you probably have experienced that over the last couple of weeks, but it's really important to keep that in mind, right? In fact, your entire team, most of the time, it's probably smaller than the, let's say, the administrative team of the manager you're talking to, right? So you're out there sometimes even calling a second or third time, screaming for attention. And this mismatch is really important when you talk about creating partnerships and really trying to manage this risk. Because an important item that leads to it is the second item on this slide is the longest of the partner schedule becomes your longest item. And what we mean by that is actually just a priority and an agenda risk, right? So what does it mean? Quite often we hear larger companies say, well, you know what, we make that decision, for instance, about your startup, of collaborating with your startup, or working on your specific product. We make that decision at our next planning meeting, right? And you ask, well, when is that planning meeting? And they say, well, we have that quarterly. And 90 days to a startup, I mean, you probably have experienced that in the last couple of weeks, but 90 days to a startup is a long time, right? I mean, you might be making decisions on a daily or on a weekly basis, and you're on a tight schedule, and you're on a limited also on limited funding, of course. So you have limited time and energy and money. So it might lead to when you're working like a startup should on an intense speed and on an intense tempo, the large company partner actually might slow you down, right? So that's an important thing to remember when you're thinking about creating a partnership or establishing a partnership. Of course, also in your own priority, how important is this specific partnership? Do I need it right now, or do I need it next year or a couple of years later when I'm bigger? But this agenda risk, you see it a lot of times between startups and larger companies. This is a really important item to manage or to keep in mind when you talk about partnerships. So another thing, though, is when there's no clear ownership of the customer. And what we mean by that is that a lot of times, especially, again, larger companies might have tons of different customers, right? Different customer segments, from larger companies, smaller companies, private individuals, whatever they might be. And they have like, most of the time they have a sales force of like dozens of people. And they could be like, well, no worries about those specific customers. We've got this, right? We're working on it. It has been a customer segment for years for us. But to you as a startup, this specific customer segment is all you have. And even when it starts out with just 2 or 3 or 5 customers, for instance, if you're in a B2B market, these are vital to you. So having no clear ownership of the customer, and again, it's a combination, of course, with an agenda risk and a priority risk, is also a really important item to keep in mind when you're in this first phase of establishing partnerships. And of course, what also is a part of this, another potential risk to be aware of when partnering is, of course, starting out at the first place with different objectives, right? So like I said, a partnership, true partnership, a valuable partnership should work as a two-way street. But do you both, so you and the partner, expect the same thing to get out of the partnership, right? Are the financial metrics or goals, or are the customer growth goals, or whatever it may be, are you fully aligned from day one on what you both expect and what both are your objectives are on establishing this partnership? So these items and this risk is also, of course, it can be the same when you talk about the specific product or technology itself, right? So who owns it? Not only who owns the customer, but who owns the product, service, or technology we are talking about or we are working on, right? Who can change it? Who can tweak it? That's also part of the intelligence resources building block I talked about last week. So it can be an item which you see usually it's later on during the partnership. But again, when you are in the first steps of establishing this partnership and you're talking about goals, it's also really important to keep in mind, specifically if you work on a certain specific technology or product, to really keep that in mind. Who is the owner of it, and who can change it, who can tweak it, who has the full say on changes of our product. So talking about risk of partnership and well, what you've noticed, a lot of these risks are when you talk about partnerships between different sizes, right? Especially you as a startup thinking about partnering with a larger company, you see that a lot of times, of course. What you really need to think about, though, to what extent do I really need a partnership, and do I really need it from day one at this moment, right? So what you see a lot of times that when you're focusing on early evangelists, right? We talked about it. So customer segments on really early phase. Let's say you're focusing on that right now, but you see a lot of times that a strategic alliance or a joint venture, especially with a larger company, is not necessary. What you see most of the time in the market is only for when you're hitting mainstream customers. You need a lot of, well, not a lot of, but then you need to think about strategic alliance or joint ventures, especially with larger brands, right? Because you're a startup. Ask yourself if you should really waste your time, and waste your time is put really negatively, but to spend your time on one partner, especially in this phase of creating your own business and creating your own business model and developing your own product or service, right? Should you partner right now? Is it necessary or not? Especially when keeping in mind all the risk we've talked about. Is it a priority for now? And if yes, really try to set clear goals, clear expectations. So let's take a look at a couple other questions on partnership. What if you're completely dependent on a platform such as Facebook or the App Store? Do you still consider those big corporates as a partner in your business model canvas? Well, I guess it's a good question. So I guess it really depends on how specific it is and it works in your business model canvas. Let's say you're creating an app, right? Is the Apple App Store your partner? Just see it more as a channel, of course. Although when there are any changes on the App Store, you have to deal with it, of course. But there's not a case as a supplier relationship or like a joint venture partnership, right? When you are completely dependent on a different level on a platform, let's say you use a certain platform, let's say Facebook, right? On leveraging your own business model, then it could be turned into a partnership. But like I said, try to remember that a partnership is a two-way street, right? So if there's no communication between you and the platform, or there's nothing that you can change on the relationship or you can change on this specific partner, then it's more probably a supplier side, or maybe it's just a key resource you need to buy or need to use in your business model canvas. So that being said, on key partnership, like you see on all the examples, it's really key to keep in mind, especially in this early phase of creating your company, of course, and your startup. It's really think things through, right? When you are in early conversations with especially larger companies or bigger brands, really keep in mind all of the risk we've been talking about in this webinar, the different goals you can have, the different type of relationships, partnerships you can have in setting up partnerships. So hopefully that was helpful. Like I said, in this webinar, we wanted not only to talk about key partners as a key building block in your business model canvas, we also wanted to talk about something totally different, which is team effectiveness, especially in this phase. Like I said, most of you are creating teams, are growing your teams, are thinking about hiring someone else. So team effectiveness then comes in. And I mean, you can read a lot, tons of books and tons of websites and theories on teams and team effectiveness, right? And you should, because it's really interesting, especially for you as a founder, to really focus on, let's say, team culture and team effectiveness. But one recent example we wanted to show you guys is that of Google and Google Project Aristotle. And if you have any time left this week, I would really encourage you to read more online, of course. Try to find Project Aristotle. They have published a lot of YouTube movies on it, on their research. So what I've done there is, as you can imagine, of course, Google has probably hundreds, maybe even thousands of teams, independent teams, agile teams working on their product and their service, right? So they spent numerous years of research on, well, actually comparing all of these teams. What makes a team more efficient, more effective? What makes it more fun to work for, right? And that's the beginning of Project Aristotle. And they've published a lot of it, and we tried to summarize it on one slide when talking about success of teams, but also team effectiveness. And what you see there is the ability to influence team norms is really essential, according to Google. So what they are working on right now is creating perfect teams over and over and over again. And what you see on this slide is the summary of all of their research. Again, has been numerous years of research. So try to make some time for it to really deep dive into it. But what you see here, according to Google, what's really important on creating team effectiveness, on increasing team effectiveness, is that team members need to listen to each other and experience an equal contribution conducting team conversation. And while that may sound pretty straightforward, right, it is essential for you as a founder or let's say you're in a team of 3 co-founders to really have attention for it. Anytime you are not only in official team meetings, but also in your weekly sprint sessions or whatever it may be, or in your conversations with potential clients or potential customers. So like I said, what Google saw there is you know what was a really important factor? When team members listen to each other and have an equal contribution. Besides that, the second item is that a strong and successful team experience, on average, of course, a high social sensitivity. So they really see, and it is, of course, a combination with the first item, team members can really see from each other, listen to each other, and it has, again, it is a combination with the first item, right? They can really have a high social sensitivity on each other's impact of the team, and that's a really important item. So I guess the most important there is that teams experience a psychological safety, right? You can say whatever you want, but you feel safe to really express your opinion and express your ideas in team meetings. And other important elements, according to Google, is that team needs to believe their work is of essence, right? Well, that's probably the most straightforward thing, right? And that's also why we've tried to put an emphasis on setting goals, especially in these 10 weeks, right? What is it that you're trying to do with your company? Do we all believe in it? And do we all want to go for it, of course? And also, teams need to have the feeling their work is of personal interest, right? And I guess the most important there is alignment, of course, personal alignment with business alignment. And teams need to have concrete goals and clearly defined roles. Again, it's in combination with, is our work of essence, of course. This is important. We really believe in it. And again, also team members need to know they can count on each other, right? Not only on a professional level, maybe, but also on a personal level. So again, if you have the time, really try to, you have a couple of excellent movies on YouTube. Try to look for a Google Aristotle project, and hopefully it's also valuable to you as a founder or as a startup team to really create your own culture and create your own norms for creating a team effectiveness. Okay, so we're about to close this webinar. Let's take a look at the upcoming Friday. Startups and coaches. We have a full 3-hour work session to work on further designing, developing, or validating your business model. It really depends on the specific phase of your company, of course. But we have experienced, and we've heard that a lot of companies would appreciate if we spend more time actually working on together with the coach and with us, of course, on the business model. So we spend this Friday on that. But also, of course, to co-create experiments, if that's applicable. And maybe if you have time left Friday, also to actually run this experiment. So come prepared upcoming Friday so we can put the full 3 hours to most use. Also, and we've also shortly discussed it last Friday, the Monday after it, our film crew will be filming the webinar. So also think about who can be available, who will be available upcoming Monday for that session. And also, we talked about our end pitch. As a startup, think about who you want to be. Who do you want to be your guest, of course, for this end pitch? Is it a potential investor? Is it maybe even potential partner? Is it a customer you're thinking about? Think about it already, because we want to create a guest list on time, of course, and send out the invite. So we'll be talking about that upcoming Friday as well, maybe even creating the guest list already. But for this week, try to write down a couple of names that you want to be there at the end pitch. So all the other viewers, or also the startups and coaches who are watching, if you have any questions on partnerships or one of the other building blocks of your business model canvas, if you're working on it, if you have any questions during the week after this webinar, please reach out. Of course, we're happy to help. Next week, we will be talking about the last building block of your business model canvas, which is the cost side of your business model, of course. But we also combine that. We will combine it with talking about startup finance 101, as I call it. So digging a bit deeper in how finance and all the metrics work, and what are the important metrics of finances in in your startup and when growing your startup. For now, that's the end of this webinar. There are no more questions left, I see. Thanks again for watching. Have a great week and see you upcoming Friday. Thank you.